Look at all these rocks. And look at the size of these rocks that are piled on top of one another. And it's interesting that if rocks didn't have any kind of meaning, what would be the purpose? Why would anybody do this type of thing? This is material, but it also shouts the spirit of a human being's endeavor to survive. It speaks louder than all the written books. This tells a story. This tells a story of survival.
Baranof Island, one of the largest islands in southeast Alaska. Like neighboring islands, its nearly impenetrable steep mountains hold pockets of wet, temperate rainforest, which receive up to 8 feet of rain and 4 feet of snow each year. Baranof, in northern southeast Alaska, is the home of the Tlingit people. For thousands of years, their ancestors thrived off the bounty of the ocean, hunting seasonally further inland. But in the late 1700s, Europeans began to occupy Tlingit country, exerting political and economic control of their ancestral lands and waters. Commercial fishing, fur trading, logging, and missionary activity forced drastic changes in Tlingit heritage. Nevertheless, many Tlingits have managed to maintain major elements of their culture. Their songs and dance display the importance of tradition, passing down their culture through rich storytelling. Some of those stories are about rocks.
We have a lot of oral traditions about the flood and people going to mountaintops. And, there are some specific stories about rocks and rock formations.
You see those mountain tops. It says on one of those mountain tops, right at the top there's a rock pile.
If it wasn't for these mountains, there wouldn't be much people here.
They went to the top of that mountain where when water was coming up, the earth was flooded. They started building rafts and they made ropes to tie themselves to the mountain. But even the mountain went under.
Today, west wind 10 knots, seas 2 feet or less. Tonight, west wind 10 knots, seas 2 feet or less. Areas of fog with visibility 1 nautical mile or less range. Wednesday, light wind 2 knots.
It's an adventure. We're going places where people don't normally go. It's kind of a small-scale expedition.
My colleague, Dr. Bill Hunt, and I got an NSF grant in 2012 to investigate the cairns and rock features on this portion of Baranof Island.
And we're examining archaeological sites that no one has ever examined before, so all of those things together just makes it a very interesting project.
In late July 2013, our group of 8 researchers set up base camp on a windswept ridge near Cross Peak Mountain. We spent the next 4 weeks working above tree line in Tongass National Forest. It's the largest temperate rainforest in the world, and one of the last true wilderness regions along the Pacific coast.
To contemporary human life and modern societies is to attempt to understand how people responded to the changes in the environment, which we know have been going on for thousands of years, as well as changes in the social environment. So in other words, as this area, let's say in this case, Southeast Alaska, became increasingly populated, the social dynamics changed such that it is somewhat complex relative to other parts of the globe.
Basically what we're doing is surveying where a number of rock cairns, which is just kind of an ambiguous term for stone piles of any shape or size. So what we're doing is surveying that, getting better measurements, getting better data to try and understand why they're here and why they're only in specific locations on this mountain.
Last year we attempted to come up here, but the snow level was such that it wasn't practical or feasible to set up a camp and to do any kind of pedestrian survey, which is what we're doing right now, the three of us, Mike and Liz and I.
In other words, we'll just sort of designate an area and we'll walk it
And see if there's any other cairns there or find any other kind of cultural features.
I collect both GPS and terrestrial laser scanner data, or LiDAR data. So this is a terrestrial scanner, and so basically what it does is it creates a 3D image of anything that you pointed at using laser beams. So now I've leveled it and I've configured the camera, and now I can go ahead and scan. So you can see this is where we were, and then across the way here is that mound.
These three-dimensional maps provide a realistic view of this landscape, helping us pinpoint the locations of each cairn. Lichenologist Bruce McCune and graduate student Nijma Ali are from Oregon State University. They're studying the lichens that grow on the cairns.
A lichen is a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an alga. By symbiotic, I mean it's a mutualism. That is, each partner derives something from the other that is required. One of the main points of this overall study is try to understand why these cairns are here, where they are, how old they are, and lichens have a contribution to the part of the story which is how old they are. If you just built a cairn right now, there'd be lots of freshly exposed rock without lichens on them. Over time, lichens and bryophytes would colonize your pile of rocks and eventually become completely covered with them. So by documenting the degree of succession happening on the cairns, we can estimate the age of those cairns.
One of the most important parts of Bruce and Nijma's research in estimating a cairn's age is recording everything that's growing on it. Dividing the cairn into 4 quadrants creates a more manageable way to document this microhabitat. After each plant, moss, and lichen is recorded, a story begins to emerge, and through the trained eyes of a lichenologist, a general understanding of a cairn's age is revealed.
So hopefully we'll get a more general tool that we can say, well, we find cairns in various alpine habitats here. We can estimate the age of it based on the degree of plant succession on the cairn.
Geology student Elizabeth Howard is a member of the Kagwantan clan. She was elected by the Sitka tribe of Alaska to join our research team.
I guess the serenity I feel being up here, I take that as a sign that I definitely appreciate what these cairns have. To be around them and to be here, I think it's pretty incredible. I don't know, I feel the importance of them. They're not just coincidental. I mean, they had a solid, purpose, and that is incredible.
Each step reminded us of people who were here before us. We had been told these cairns were sacred, so we took every care to respect the Tlingit traditions, stories, and wishes about how they should be treated. At the same time, we wanted to discover the story behind these cairns in scientific terms.
We're taking some of them apart in order to see if there's anything in them or under them that might provide some clues as to why these things were built. While we're doing that, we're hoping to gather some materials we can radiocarbon date and get an idea of how old some of these cairns are.
We may not have an absolute date. Hopefully we'll get some relative sense of when activity took place here relative to one further north or south or down below or up above. We'd like to find out which ones are either older or younger or more recent than another.
We recorded 49 at the site that we were working on, and with a little helicopter survey, we found another 29 cairns before we had done either one of these surveys. There was probably only maybe 1 or 2 cairns recorded for all of southeast Alaska, and now we know that they're pretty much ubiquitous. Practically every mountain top, I would guess, in the southeast Alaska probably has these cairns.
After collecting our final soil samples, the weather began to shift. Winter was coming to southeast Alaska, and our time on the mountain was over. But in many ways, the search for answers had just begun. Once back in the labs of Oregon State University, the lichen crew began analyzing samples and interpreting data.
Consider just building a cairn yourself. You're picking up rocks from that area, and you're building this conical structure. And many of these rocks will already have pre-existing lichens on them. And over time, the rocks and the rock surfaces become inundated with vegetation. And this is basically just a simple successional pattern. So this successional status on each cairn will also help us infer the age of these structures.
We got a report from the lichenologists that said that from their perspective, it looked like these cairns were prehistoric.
We shouldn't take these ages as absolute. Rather, they should be seen as potential age ranges. So we can say that the minimum age of the cairns are 187 years old to maybe a maximum of 892, with maybe an average age of about 470 years old.
The samples that were radiocarbon dated showed that the cairn was built between 300 years ago and 1,500 years ago.
I think that what we should assume is that that these cairns were, based on the very small sample that we had, several hundred years old, or were constructed several hundred years ago.
This whole story that we're doing is just one really small part of Tlingit culture. These things are more than just a pile of rocks. These things are places of importance. They're places where the spirit, Tlingit spirit, cultural spirit, lives there.
It's more than philosophical. It's very spiritual. And I know that most scientists don't want to deal with spirituality, but it's something that we strongly believe. There's a great flood that's coming. Our people have survived this, but the greatest challenge that we have today is a flood of pride, of self-centeredness, of ego, and really, in a way, a flood of a different culture that has come upon us.
The elders are like the encyclopedias. They're the ones that hold all the knowledge of the culture. And when they die, everything they know is gone.
And the elders would say, remember, we survived that flood a long time ago. This is why we've been here all these years. This will not overtake us. Tlingit Ayauan. We're Tlingit people.
I think the oral tradition, along with, or in conjunction with other means of investigation, work together in order to approach a question.
This was very important to us, combining the Tlingit tribe member interviews with modern research methods. We did this in order to better understand the cairns and what they meant to those who built them. These stacked rocks may have offered protection from floods and storms. We learned they hold a spiritual legacy. All of our research led us to more questions. But that's the goal of scientific inquiry, to never stop questioning. It's also the goal of spirituality, to never stop searching. When used together, science and spirituality help us ask the most fundamental questions.
Hey, big man, come down from there. You know, with your hands, what you can do from there. I know that you loved one time long ago, and what happened to you then made your heart turn to stone. And there's a rain coming down to the valley below, and I know just how they feel. 'Cause when the water rises, they start to look for high ground, just like